My name is Dion Mishler. I'm the Inside Sales Manager for Neudesic and the moderator for this webcast. Again, this webcast is presented by Gordon Montgomery. He is Neudesic's UX Practice Director, comes to us from our Austin, Texas office, and where he's very highly sought after not only for industry speaking engagements, but also, of course, to work with our clients on their UX strategies. So we're very fortunate and lucky to have some time with him today. If you're logged on, you should all be able to see the title slide that states how to build a user experience strategy for this economy. And please note, we do run the latest version of live meeting, and this may cause some difficulties. So there was a previous recording that showed a few of the key features of live meeting. This is a streaming audio or webcast, so we encourage you to use the feedback feature located in the upper right toolbar, as well as the Q&A feature located in the upper left toolbar. Please note that all questions will be held until the end. And again, we definitely encourage people to ask questions. Lastly, this webcast is being recorded. We will make it available to you as soon as it is available, most likely in about a week or so. So at this time, if everybody is ready to go, please make sure your feedback color is set to green for go, and we will begin. And I'd like to turn the presentation over to Gordon. Gordon?
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Hello, everybody. So today I'll just give you a quick overview of what we're going to go through in the next 30 or 40 minutes. As Dion mentioned, I am the User Experience Manager for Neudesic nationally. And obviously we're entering into a business economy that is rather different than many of us have experienced in the past. And we believe that user experience design has a lot to offer in this economy to really help us thrive as we move forward. So what we'll cover today is user experience and how that is broken out into its different elements. A little bit about aspects that apply directly to this economy, and then we'll finish up with some more specific services that we offer at Neudesic and how we apply those to great benefit. So I shall begin. And do let me know if you can't hear me or anything like that along the way, or let Dion know, and we'll fix any audio or any of those issues. But I think we're okay. So user experience, really, the way we define it is just really immersing ourselves in what users are all about, making sure that they actually be successful, and designing a system which is easier and more pleasant to use. And we know that at the end of the day, if something is easier and more pleasant to use, then we'll, as humans, tend to use it more. So it's really a business methodology that we have, looking at things from the user's perspective. So this economy, as I'm sure we all know, all too well at the moment, is really causing us to really fine-tune how we approach our businesses and how we approach our practice of user experience as we serve our clients. One thing really to bear in mind is the more kind of optimistic view of the next year and next couple of years is that value is still to be had out there. We still absolutely value our customers as our number one part of the business, and we can generate value for those customers by delivering really quality services to them. One of the easiest ways to do that is really to focus on the end user, and funnily enough, the User Experience Design Group is focused exactly on that. In fact, just as a side note, one of the cheapest ways to do that is actually through public-facing websites. Although today my information is related to both intranets and the public-facing website on the internet. So really back to basics for this economy, BACK, buzz, analysis, customers, and KISS, keeping it simple. So, some of the ways on the public-facing web that you might start looking into are social networking, really trying to find out what your users are doing and helping them to connect with each other. Social networking is a very broad and very new term. People use it to cover a lot of things, and literally it can cover everything from a simple feedback forum to thinking about how you can connect a little bit better with your user group, be it internal or external. Really getting out ahead and using the technology that's available in platforms like SharePoint and staying out ahead, analyzing, working out what your users are doing, using web analytics, looking at what your competitors are doing, and really then thinking before you act. And in this economy, it's very tempting just to kind of slash and burn, basically, and and cut back on everything. But doing a little bit of business intelligence work, we can think before we act. And of course, focusing on our customers, that's our paramount directive always. Finding and focusing on those best customers, even internally, who's really using your intranet, what are they doing with it, how can you get more information from those folks, and getting that feedback back into your process and your system moving forward. And ultimately, keeping everything as simple as possible is always the best way forward, we find. And so, as you think about calling your end users to action, there's kind of a funnel that people move through. And so we can help people become more aware of what we have on our website, our intranet. And people will start to consider taking some action. And really, it's the action we want to tend towards, placing the correct amount of information, not overloading pages with extraneous content, and making sure that it's obvious how a user can actually take action, where they go to do that, and how they can find that information. So designing the information. We'll speak a little bit more about that in a moment. And then there's sort of a crossover that happens between emotively, psychologically connecting with an information space and then actually interacting with it. So, and that actually leads to adoption. So if it's simpler and easier to use and interact with your intranet, then more people will tend to adopt it and actually use the features that are there. And then ultimately want to move towards, from that awareness to an affinity, meaning that people aren't just using the system, they're actually living and breathing it, and are promoting it to others. Just moving on to the next slide. So really, it's about that kind of 80-20 of the functionality. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Pareto principle, where really only in the sense of technology, 20% of that functionality is used by about 80% of the users, and user experience design really tries to take that approach. When you think about it, or most people think about web design or intranet design, they think about the screen and they think about the look and feel. Excuse me. But really, the look and feel really only covers about 10%. Only the 10% of that iceberg, which is showing above the surface. Really, the rest of it, which is really what you should be concerned about, is the user strategy, the workflow, how you move through the information space, consistent navigation, the different objects that make up that space, tabs and buttons, and the interrelationships of that information. So that all drives, obviously, the look and feel, the visuals and the menus, etc., that we're actually interacting with. But the user experience approach actually brings value because we're really focusing in on those end users and what their tasks are, and using that strategy to drive what we design. And just to dig a little bit deeper, there are layers within that strategy. As I've mentioned already, user experience strategy is very user-centric. The user is at the center of it, and we start and finish all of our work with the users. But it's really beyond what just the user sees in terms of the visual screen. It's how they interact with that information space and how that ties back to the business need at the end of the day. So when someone interacts with a screen that we design, they're interacting with the most valuable part of our business. And in this economy, in this day and age, that's really what we want to encourage our end users to do. And there's a lot of functionality that we have on our websites and intranets, as an industry, that really isn't adding value. So it's really digging into that user experience, digging into the user research, and tying that directly back to the business so it's integrated from end to end. And really, if you think about it, when we have conversations about what we're going to do next and planning for 2009 and 2010, there's usually somebody that's not at the table. And from a user experience approach, and hopefully really from everyone's business approach these days, we should be thinking that the user is not at the table, and we need to work out ways to bring the user to the table. So UX, really wants to find that happy path to the end user's goal. We really believe that nobody fundamentally wakes up and says, I must use the system today. The thought is usually from a user perspective, I want to achieve my goal, achieve my task, usually, through intranet or a website. I want to actually perform some activity. And UX can actually be applied at multiple points throughout that process in order to help those users get to those goals through the system that we build for them. And so really, in a nutshell, user experience design leads to improvements in adoption and brand perception. Productivity, which we often don't think about, how much time is lost minute by minute on being unable to find content on your intranet or clicking through a website and not really understanding what that company does. A website, for example, is running 24/7 and really could drive a lot more lead generation and increase conversion rates if it was designed with the user in mind or from a user perspective. Of course, increase the loyalty and retention of the customers you already have. And one thing to bear in mind is, if you're building just that 20% that's really valuable, that's going to reduce your development and support costs. And we always tend towards zero training if we possibly can when we design something as, as simple and as easy to use as possible. So just the good news in all of this is that the earlier we get involved from a user experience perspective, the cheaper it is, with reducing budgets as we have right now definitely on the IT side. It's actually going to reduce, or actually increase rather, the cost-benefit ratio. So it's going to reduce the amount of money you need to spend up front. The earlier you start getting involved from a user experience perspective and really finding out what those users want to do and building on top of that rather than starting with the system and trying to work backwards. So there's some good news in all of this. And in fact, it really does not require thousands of end users. In fact, a person called Jacob Nielsen is one of the forerunners in part of user experience called usability testing. He actually says, and most people agree with him at this point, that about 3 to 6 end users will be sufficient to show us most of the usability problems. A usability test can generate thousands of different issues, and really, in this day and age, we're really going to focus on just a few that we're going to actually fix. So quite quickly, we can find the major problems with only about 3 to 6 end users, and then iterate around and improve 2 or 3 times rather than just doing one massive survey or focus group, for the same price. So these things, can be very, very cost-effective indeed. Actually, usually running for 5 or 10K for a kind of one-day test or something like that. So really, how does this apply to us kind of moving forward? And you can think of UX really as your research and design department. Taking a UX approach, you can really dig into the insights that our users can give us. Our customers is how we like to think of them, and then design for those end users. Typically at Neudesic, we have 3 main roles on top of the kind of the classic kind of design roles. From principal strategist, user researcher, and information architect. And these 3 roles often exist in just in one person, actually performing the strategy work, digging into the user research, and then servicing that through an information architecture, wireframes, and the like. And in fact, every member of our team, I'm proud to say, either has over 10 years industry experience and or a master's degree in information science. And our user experience strategy really, it really transforms those ideas that we have, like what we're going to do next, into a reality. So, we really focus and create a definition on what needs to be designed. Really start small. So quite often a lot of the approaches we have are workshop-based, where we'll collaborate with multiple stakeholders and end users together, and then work out where the value really is, really applying that 80-20 rule to develop and deliver something that will work for the end user. And the theory is that if we deliver what the end user wants, then that will drive revenue for us. user experience design breaks out into the 4 main areas: user research, information architecture, visual design, and design technology. And we have multiple different methodologies within that. Some of those are shown here. But, you know, it really helps to start thinking about what it is you want to achieve with your website or your intranet. Do you just want it to be effective, you know, just actually work correctly? Efficient? Do you want the level of effort that users have to expend to use it to increase, to be more efficient? Or perhaps you're more interested in it just being engaging, you know, just kind of doing the color, look and feel. But really what we'd advocate is moving towards a fully engineered platform, so that we don't just make something easy to use, but actually make so that it's engineered specifically for that end user audience. And some of the deliverables that we create, you know, kind of card sorting, or the kind of the persona profiles there in the top right, or in the bottom left to see an example of a conceptual map. So when we perform the user research, we actually document that so that anybody can pick it up and understand it. The information architecture is much more detailed: site maps, wireframes, and flows and the like, all fully annotated. And then we start getting into interaction design. How does that information all interact with each other, and to create an interface that a user can actually directly interact with? And then, of course, laying the visual design on top of all of that structure. These are actually SharePoint examples with business intelligence and other parts of the Microsoft stack laid on top of that. In fact, we're very proud of our own Neudesic.com homepage, which has Silverlight running on it as well. And then when you start getting into design technology, you can start branching out into WPF and Silverlight as well, and kiosks and the like, not just website work. So some examples of how, you know, UX can be applied before and after. You can see quite easily the visual impact of taking a sort of an out-of-the-box version of a SharePoint portal and then applying a little bit of information architecture and user experience, user research insights, and then visual design to really raise the profile of the information space that we're creating. Jack in the Box is a client we've worked with. I'd just like to show really briefly, you know, their existing corporate intranet. Then we got some different input from different folks within the team and the client. We were able to build out a master page wireframe, annotated, and we deconstructed the information they had and then reconstructed it in this format. And then we're able to start layering in some of the visual design components and additional details, ultimately ending up with 3 different visual design versions, which is really just that final little part of the iceberg, right? So it's really that final veneer, which really gives that incredible level of engagement, so that the entire site options that were on offer here were all built on the same underlying ironwork that built the building, but each one of them could have a different kind of, you know, color or look and feel depending on which our client decided to actually choose. So I'd maybe like just to kind of summarize towards the end here how all that work maps out. And really there are sort of 3 main questions you should be asking yourself. What are your critical success criteria? I found that, you know, over the years, over the last 15 years or so, projects that, you know, have gone off the rails and we've had to, you know, recover, have done so because we didn't often have a clear definition of what the critical success criteria were. I'm happy to report that, you know, all projects got back on the rails, but it really is worth bearing in mind that you need to think about what are the critical benefits, not the features that the new system will bring to the organization. And then thinking about the different levels. Is your website or intranet just effective? Does it just work? Is it just successful? Or have you thought about the level of efficiency and how to actually discover and then ensure that users are getting to the information that you want them to find as quickly and as easily as possible? Then that visual design kind of comes in there so that users are connected with the system, not just when they're using it, but when they're not using it, they feel like they want to go back and interact with it again. That applies to intranets as much as it does to public websites. and then really getting to the level 4, which is the optimal level that really encompasses all the preceding pieces: effectiveness, efficiency, and engagement. The system is completely engineered, and the user feels like it's really their system and it works specifically for them. They really feel very, very connected both with the brand and with the underlying features and functionality. And then the third component is really thinking about your end users. And often we really don't do that. We think we know them so well, and even after approaching 2 decades of work myself, I'm constantly amazed by end users and how much they've changed over the years with the advent of the internet, etc. So it's really worthwhile thinking about those 3 things: your critical success criteria, where you are on the success scale and where you want to be in the future, and thinking about your end users. And I just wanted to map out briefly, kind of how that kind of works when we start thinking about the product and process of user experience design. There are multiple different end results that our clients are after, and there are multiple different aspects of user experience that we can apply to it in different quantities. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. For example, if a client is thinking about just making sure that their intranet looks good, then we would say that you don't really need to focus on your information architecture, your IA. Really, the UR, the user research, about 50% of what we would do there is important, but the creative design is going to be a very heavy component, and maybe some design technology as well, kind of reading vertically down through the list. And then that also feeds into some of the different aspects we work on, probably mainly on visual design comps, not so much on storyboards or concept models. So you sort of get the idea that there are different elements that we can combine and contrast and bring together to get to the end result. You can read that table both horizontally and vertically. So there's quite a lot of information there, and well, we'll be happy to share with you, this, and maybe you can actually dig into it afterwards if it were of further interest to you. So how we move typically through a project at Neudesic, for example, usually lasts 2 to 4 weeks. This one happens to last about 4 weeks. We usually kick everything off with a workshop and really digging into both the technical and the functionality from the user's point of view, and start documenting that information. That usually drives then through the middle of the project, developing conceptual models, showing you some examples previously, and some of the new ideas and brainstorming, bringing all that together in very much in a workshop kind of manner with whiteboards, etc., and really quite rough sketches to pull as much information together in a lightweight sense as possible, but generating a lot of information and knowledge, which then drives development. Within a UX perspective, we create things like sitemap, process flows, and wireframes, and then layering on that visual design. And of course, we're integrated all the time with our technology team, so that what we're building is not just a design that we throw over the wall, it's actually being technically validated all the way along. So that is really kind of the strategic roadmap driven from an end user's perspective. There are a bunch of other services that Neudesic tends to offer, and we tend to offer our clients. That usually are quite easy, 10 to 20K, kind of smaller kickoff services, kickstart services, lasting about 3 to 5 days each. What you're looking at now is a list of our main and most popular services. I'll maybe just dig into a couple very briefly, but again, these are all fully documented, so you can read through them at your leisure, perhaps after the webinar here today. So the UX workshop, for example, is really starting to dig into a little bit of everything. We sort of call this the inch deep and mile wide approach. So we'll really pull everybody together in a room and really start digging into the user research, the information architecture, structural components, visual design, and style requirements, as well as some of the design and technology components as well. And what we come out of that with is a user experience brief, which will outline really the summary of all of our findings and recommended strategies. So that's what really our most popular service. And we quite often start our engagement with our clients with one of these strategy workshops. It so really brings the whole process to light and really focuses in on the end user. And one other one I just wanted to dwell on today, this works particularly well for public-facing websites, which we're seeing a lot more traction on, and I think a lot more of our marketing-oriented clients are thinking about the public-facing website that already exists and how that might actually drive way more lead generation. So what we do is we'll actually do a usability assessment and looking at certain features and functionality of the existing website or intranet, and then make recommendations on how that little piece of functionality could be improved. And that improved usability then will help drive leads and productivity of users actually interacting with the site. As I say, there are a bunch of other services that we found to be very useful, and this will be available to you in the printed version of the presentation today. Just click through them. Okay, so that is all we have time for today. I think I'll turn it back over to Dion, and thank you very much for your time. And if you have questions, fire away.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Gordon. I love this presentation. It's so important to make sure that our end users adopt whatever it is, that technology-wise, that we're going to implement in our organizations. And that adoption rate is half the battle sometimes. And we do have one question, a couple questions for you. You know, like anything, sometimes it can be overwhelming. So when it comes to some of these user experience components, can you talk a little bit about the best place to start?
Yes, absolutely. And I think I referred to it a little bit there in one of the final service offerings that we often use. And that is the kind of workshop approach. Really what we try to do is bring the end user really in front of our clients, and to really help everyone understand what it is the goals, the tasks, and the behaviors are of that end user, and using that to drive the design. So it's very typical that with our clients, because we're a technology-oriented society these days, to start thinking about the technology solution first and trying to retrofit that back to the users. So the best start point is always really getting an understanding of those end users, and we found the best way to do that is in a kind of a workshop mode. Okay.
Very nice. And can you talk a little bit about some of the successful projects that you've worked on where you had talked previously about some of the projects that kind of went off the rails, and unfortunately I think we all have a testimonial to that effect. Can you talk a little bit about your experience of what it kind of, or, you know, the case study as far as getting that project back on the rail, and then what was back on the rails, and what was the end result? What did that successful project achieve for the organization?
Right. So obviously I can't really quote any client names at this point, but generically one definitely comes to mind where, you know, we'll typically have clients who say, well, you know, can we make our intranet, you know, more inviting or more engaging? You know, it needs to look sexy, or some of these type of terms, which are, you know, really in a business world, you know, quite hard to define. And so, you know, that's usually our directive. You know, can you make it, you know, easier to use and kind of look nicer? And so, when you approach that from a technology perspective only, what you start doing, you know, is just, you know, building components and kind of showing them to your client and saying, do you like this? Do you like this? And, you know, the client starts saying, well, yeah, well, I think I'll know it when I see it, and, you know, you kind of have this back and forth, which could be quite difficult. Luckily, you know, we spot this, you know, very early in our process in Neudesic, but the way those projects, you know, get back on the rails rapidly is by when a client asks us, you know, to make something, you know, look nicer, we start asking why. And, well, who is it that's going to start using this information space? What are they going to do there? What are the tasks they're trying to carry out? What do you perceive will happen when the site looks nicer. And so what we often find is we start taking steps backwards from the visual design, from that kind of look and feel part of the iceberg. We start going deeper, and we start getting into the information architecture, the underlying structure that underpins the look and feel. And then even getting back further than that, we start asking questions about, well, where should this information go? Which is the most important? What is the information hierarchy on the page? And we answer those questions by interviewing end users and by performing usability tests on mock-ups with end users. So really, in order to keep a project on track, we really drive it from the information that comes from the end user. And so what that drives at the end of the day is an easier to use and more pleasant interface, which then we can layer on, all that good makeup really on top to really, really make it pop. So delivering to a client that asks for something that, looks more sexy is usually a process whereby, we're digging deeper under that and working out what is the utility our client is trying to get.
Okay. Very nice. Very nice. Thank you again, Gordon, for your time today. We really appreciate it. That wraps up our session for today. And again, we were talking about how to build a user experience strategy for this economy. And again, thank you everybody for joining us today, for your questions. And again, Gordon, thank you so much for your time. And this webcast was recorded once again, and we will send it out to everybody once the recorded version is packaged and available. So thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.